To be clear, that's estate planning 101, and attorneys can spend entire careers learning all the intricacies.
You can be a legend, a voice that makes the whole world rise to its feet in applause. But just a misplaced will in a sofa cushion can drag everything into a brutal legal maelstrom for half a decade. Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul, didn't fall on stage, but it was the ambiguity behind the scenes that fractured her legacy in ways no one dared to imagine, without fanfare or a fitting farewell. There were only endless disputes among those who once called each other family. Behind the immortal voice lay a harsh truth: you can leave millions of dollars, but without proper preparation, what you leave most of is conflict. This is not just Aretha's story. This is a warning to all of us. Are you sure your family won't fall into a similar tragedy? If this resonates with you, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and don't let this lesson fade into silence. They said her voice was the voice of a generation, but I saw her voice as the cry of endurance, a sound full of pride and, at the same time, full of loneliness, as if something had never been fully articulated. People saw her step onto the stage, draped in a shimmering gown, hair elegantly styled, a radiant smile. But her back slightly stooped, her eyes holding something the camera was never close enough to fully capture. They applauded, they stood, they cheered her name. But no one clearly saw the steps of someone gradually moving towards the edge of something she had concealed for so long, so meticulously, so well that even those closest to her weren't sure they knew everything. No one truly realized the day Aretha Franklin began to fade from public view, because the way she gradually retreated into the shadows was not noisy, not ostentatious. It was as subtle as a jazz piece entering its final fade-out, leaving a prolonged silence that felt entirely natural. And that is precisely what made everything that followed even more poignant. She didn't choose to disappear. She simply drifted away quietly amidst the applause. In December 2010, news broke that she was hospitalized. Not sensational news, nor were there any photos of her on a stretcher. Just a cold announcement from her representative surgery. No reason disclosed, no diagnosis confirmed. And then, like millions of other black women, she quietly fought her battle in her own way, without fanfare, not wanting anyone's pity. She once said something that seemed light. "I've been through enough." But listening closely, it sounded like an alarm bell. No one in this world has ever been through enough, unless they are too weary to recount it anymore. After the surgery, she lost 85 pounds, a number significant enough to cause a stir if it belonged to anyone else. But because it was Aretha, the public merely praised, "She looks amazing." No one asked why a living icon would choose to transform her body so abruptly, and when someone tentatively inquired, she just smiled. "I'm eating healthier," she said. And perhaps it was true, but perhaps it was also the quickest answer to avoid a truth not easily spoken. That woman sang about freedom, about pride, about love and rejection. But she remained heartbreakingly silent when she herself faced vulnerability. She deeply understood that, in this world, especially as a black woman, weakness was not something to be openly displayed. Weakness, if present, had to be transformed into art. And she did that better than anyone. Between performances in Chicago, New York, or London, it was still Aretha, the proud voice delivering melodies that had revolutionized music. But backstage, she coughed violently. Some nights, she apologized to the audience and left, leaving the stage lights still on and an orchestra playing aimlessly without a singer. People said she was erratic. The press began to ask questions, but no one dared to confront the possibility she was weakening, faster than anyone imagined. Then in 2017, she announced her full retirement. No more touring, no more appearances at award ceremonies, no more contributing vocals to movie soundtracks. Her withdrawal was so gentle that many didn't realize it was a true farewell. She chose a quiet departure, giving no reason, not holding a grand farewell concert like her contemporaries. Just a simple statement, "It's time." And then she left, as if knowing that no one can stay in the spotlight forever, especially when that light is too dazzling to obscure the simmering pain within. People assumed an artist of her stature would have dozens of private doctors, an entire care team, and be closely monitored. But not everyone understood, even in the spotlight. Someone like her still carried the habit of self-protection, the survival reflex deeply ingrained, since she had to sing in church to prove that the voice of a young black girl could make an entire congregation rise in reverence. The story of Aretha's silence is not just one person's story. It is the echo of millions of women, quietly facing the imperfections in their bodies every day without knowing whom to tell. They are the ones strong enough to care for their entire families, but not important enough to be truly asked about their health. They are the ones who know how to hide, because life taught them vulnerability will be judged, not embraced. Aretha did not collapse dramatically. She did not leave a tear-soaked letter. Instead, she retreated gradually, little by little, step by step, as if clearing the stage of her life without needing anyone's help. But that silence was far from peaceful. It was a silent scream, a stubborn pride that only those who have lived under such scrutinizing gazes can understand. And now, with everything in the past, people are beginning to piece together the signs: rapid weight loss, canceled performances, brief encounters, and that gaze, the gaze that once made the world listen, but now remains only a memory for those who stood very close. Aretha Franklin concealed her illness, not because she wanted to deceive, but because that was how she survived. In this world, not everyone is allowed to be openly vulnerable, especially when you are Aretha, a voice that once represented a struggle. No one teaches us how to remain silent without being forgotten, but Aretha did it, and precisely because of that. Her silence made the whole world bow its head, not just because she was a legend, but because, after all, she was also just a person who learned to endure in silence like millions of others whose names are not written in history. On August 16, 2018, the Detroit sky was heavy, not with rain, but with a profound stillness that settled over the city, as if the entire space was trying to remain silent for something sacred that was departing. Aretha Franklin, the woman who sang the soul of a nation, concluded her journey in an old house on Boston Boulevard. No noise, no camera flashes. Only a few of her closest confidants stood quietly there, and a silent room where the voice that once shook the world had ceased forever. People only later named the illness, a cold, lengthy phrase, neuroendocrine pancreatic tumor, PNET. But uttering that name didn't make anyone understand anything more clearly, because that disease was unlike anything people usually heard of. It didn't scream. It didn't manifest with dramatic symptoms or clear images. It crept in, like an uninvited guest, stepping softly into the body without anyone noticing until it was too late. And the bitter truth was this: its very quietness, the subtlety it carried, prevented people from realizing what was truly happening to her. Aretha didn't say much. She was never the type to parade her pain in the streets from a young age. She knew what it meant to keep things private. In her world, worries were not allowed to be shown, especially when everyone around was just waiting to see how a black woman would fall. Many only knew she was tired. Then she was absent, canceled shows, rapid weight loss. But someone like Aretha, who would think she might be facing a silent battle within her own body. PNET, a name like a code, is not easily detected. It masquerades under very common symptoms: fatigue, loss of appetite, minor aches. These signs can stem from dozens of different causes. And in her case, no one thought it would be the beginning of such a quiet final chapter. Not until she passed away did people piece together all the fragments: the silence, the withdrawal, the sometimes distant gaze, and the way she avoided questions about her health as if simply speaking of it would make everything collapse. Her passing left not only a void in music, it also opened up another conversation, painful but necessary, about our lack of understanding of complex and rare diseases. On the day she died, numerous doctors, medical experts, and cancer associations spoke out. Because peanut tea is not like what is commonly seen in news headlines, it is so rare that sometimes even doctors don't consider it. And what's more, it is often overlooked in patients with less access to close monitoring, or those who, like Aretha, choose to live privately and not share about their health. Her silence, whether stemming from self-respect or personal instinct, also reflected a sad reality. Not everyone is afforded the space to be vulnerable. In many cultures, especially within the Black community, admitting one needs help remains difficult. People are taught to be strong, to stand tall, to fight without complaining. But perhaps the price of such resilience is sometimes solitude. In her final days, she maintained her privacy like a shield. No cameras, no press. Only a few trusted individuals were allowed into the room. They said she remained gentle, still gracious, still Aretha, though the light in her eyes was no longer the same. And there was something peculiar despite her health rapidly declining. No one heard her complain, not once. As if she was still preserving her image as a queen, even though the throne was now only a memory, and the crown was no longer visible to anyone. She left no final message, nor did she speak much about the pain she endured. But her passing served as the strongest reminder that there are diseases that do not scream, yet are powerful enough to kill a legend. And there are women who, too accustomed to bearing burdens, have forgotten that they too deserve to be heard. The medical community, after that August 16th, began to speak more about peanut. They began to review diagnostic procedures, overlook signs, cases like Aretha's, someone with enough wealth, enough status, yet still silently defeated by the disease. And then they realized if someone like her could be missed, how many others, not famous, not known, are living in confusion and awaiting something they don't even know the name of. Aretha Franklin, the voice of decades, quietly fought her final battle. Without medals, without farewell speeches, only a long sleep in the old house in Detroit, once filled with music, now only the faint whisper of wind outside the window. And ultimately, she left the world an important lesson: learn to listen to your body, even when it only whispers. No one would have expected someone like her, who once controlled every note, every step, every stage appearance, to leave behind such a mess. People thought a queen like Aretha Franklin must have prepared everything meticulously from beginning to end. But no, it turned out the only thing she couldn't control was the ending. And it began, not grandly like any stage, but from a sofa cushion. When she passed away, the public believed she died intestate, without leaving any legal will. With such immense wealth and fame, people expected at least a written record, a few signatures, or a notarized document. But for a long time after her passing, her family and lawyers quietly searched, in silence, in dusty drawers, even in places no one would have thought of. Then one day, they found the first one, a handwritten will from 2010. Careful, certain, placed in a locked cabinet, each page notarized. In it, Aretha chose Ted White DeSand, her eldest son, to hold control of her assets. It was like how she lived: private, orderly, everything protected, logical. But then, 4 years later, another document appeared, also handwritten, but this time without notarization, no official seal, just a few folded pages, tucked deep within the fabric of an old sofa cushion in her home. A place no one would have thought of, a place so peculiar that it left people surprised, skeptical, and heartbroken. This will was dated 2014, 4 years later than the first, and in it, the designated person was no longer Ted, but Kekhoff Franklin, her youngest son, along with Sabrina Owens, her niece. The story should have ended there. But no, that handwritten document from 2014, unnotarized, without clear authentication, bequeathed the house and cars to Kekhoff, a complete change from the previous version. And so everything erupted. The family, who had stood together at the funeral, who had embraced and cried under her large printed photo. Now began an endless dispute. People argued, was the document hidden in the cushion her true will or just an unfinished draft? Written in a moment of weakness, why was it not notarized, and why? If she truly wanted to change her will, didn't she destroy the old one? Why let both exist in parallel like a cryptic joke? But no one could answer those questions, because the only person who could clarify was no longer there. Outwardly, the media called it family drama, but inwardly, for those truly living through it, it was a rift that ran deep to the roots. A mother, an icon, a legend, leaving behind a pile of documents of unclear legal value and a cushion as evidence. And her children, who once gathered around for simple meals, were now forced to stand on opposing sides, bringing lawyers and even memories to confront each other. None of them were bad people. That's the most heartbreaking part. Kekhoff, the youngest son, perhaps believed his mother trusted him more later on, as her illness worsened, as their bond grew closer. And Ted, the eldest son, believed in what was clearly written, authenticated, and carefully kept by her. No one was wrong, but that doesn't mean everyone was right. The pain wasn't about which house was divided to whom or which car belonged to whom, but rather a family once held together by love was now being torn apart by suspicion. Every handwritten word, every document of unclear origin, became an invisible weapon. And the irony was the one who taught them the value of respect was no longer there to teach them how to handle a battle no one wanted. The sofa of years past, once her resting place after long performances, now became a vessel for the storm. Just a few papers tucked into that cushion were enough to make so many years of love, so many memories, so fragile. And people began to wonder, was it because she didn't fully trust anyone, that she kept both versions, or was it simply that she was a mother, like any other mother, always struggling between her beloved children, not knowing whom to choose, not wanting to hurt anyone? No one knows for sure, just like her, throughout her life. She always kept a part of herself silent. There are things Aretha Franklin never said, but we can feel, like the fear of upsetting anyone, the fear of leaving behind turmoil, or simply the trust that the family would eventually find a way to understand each other. But sometimes, that trust is the most fragile thing. The decision lay tucked in a few scribbled lines, not a song, not a recording contract, nor the applause from the audience, but a few old, handwritten papers, hidden in an even older sofa, after 5 years of arguments, debates, suppressed emotions, and then outbursts. Finally, they had to sit down with a question no one wanted to ask: which will was authentic? Michigan law has a concept called a holographic will, a handwritten will, no notarization needed, provided it can be proven to be the true handwriting and intent of the deceased. It sounds simple, but in reality, it opens up a labyrinthine dead end for families without someone to mediate. With Aretha Franklin, everything was even more complicated. She wasn't just a mother, she was the queen, a woman revered by all of America. Yet she left behind an outcome as if she had never prepared. The question lingered for nearly 5 years, pulling taut like a violin string should they choose the 2010 version, carefully notarized. Each page stamped, as clear as one typically imagines a model will, or the 2014 version, no official seal, no witnesses, just her handwriting and signature at the bottom of the page. No amount of ink could measure the fissures within a family, but here, the very ink ignited it. The children, who grew up in their mother's shadow, now stood on opposite ends of the legal scale. On one side was Ted White, Second, the eldest son, reserved, once entrusted with responsibility according to the old will. On the other was Kekkoff Franklin, the youngest son, who believed that in her final years. His mother grew closer to him, understood him more, and left him more. No one was entirely correct, but in law. One isn't judged on what is right, one is judged on evidence. This silent battle consumed more than just time. It eroded patience, trust, and whatever remained of a home that once resonated with heartwarming soul melodies, the so-called will, which should have been a place to express affection. Advice and final wishes now became a stark battleground between two unclear handwritten documents. Once, a family member quietly stated in court, "We no longer know what to believe." And that statement, simple, understated, reflected an entire tragedy when there is no longer a guide. Those who remain are most easily lost. It's bitter, but justice doesn't concern itself with emotions. The Michigan jury, after many deliberations, finally had to make a decision. The 2014 will, the one tucked in the sofa cushion, was legal, valid, and truly reflected Aretha Franklin's final wishes. So it ended, at least on paper. But in the hearts of the children, it's not certain that meant liberation. Perhaps Kekkoff felt validated. Perhaps Ted felt betrayed by the very mother he once believed had chosen him. As for the others, they learned a costly lesson in a family. What divides people isn't money, but the feeling of being abandoned. People say a will is the ultimate preserver of order, but no one teaches them how to preserve each other when the one who wrote the will is no longer there. There is no glory in winning or losing here, only a sofa, once a resting place for an icon, now a symbol of the things she left unspoken. She, a woman who dared to demand respect from the entire world, could not leave clarity for her own children. Not because she lacked love, but perhaps because she always had to be strong alone, always keeping everything to herself, as strong women often do. The pain here doesn't come from loss, but from the feeling that people once loved each other so dearly. But just a piece of paper, a few strokes of ink, could shatter that affection beyond repair. In truth, everything could have been avoided if someone had spoken up sooner, if she herself had spoken up sooner. But life, you know. No one would have expected that one day someone like Aretha Franklin, a person whom the entire country respectfully bowed to, would leave such a large void, not because she passed away, but because of what she left behind: ambiguity, a costly ambiguity, leading to 5 years of litigation, hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees, and thousands of hours no one ever wanted to recall. That battle wasn't as scandalous as a tabloid sensation. There was no press hounding every step, because it wasn't sensational. It was just a few handwritten words, a few calls between lawyers, a few court sessions where the family looked at each other with lost trust. But it was that very quietness that made it the deepest cut. A cut without blood, but long-lasting pain. Pain, little by little, day by day. Aretha was once a powerful role model, but she was also human, and the mistakes she left behind were also very human. People didn't want to believe that she hadn't prepared, but that was the truth. 2 handwritten wills, one in a locked cabinet with notarization, one in a cushion without witnesses, were enough to create a legal vacuum so vast that no one dared to assert anything definitively for many years. The cost was not just money, but the loss of trust between her children, the terse phone calls, the avoided encounters, the beautiful memories stained by bitterness simply because no one was sure what mother's intent was. And finally, the haunting feeling that if that day, if at that moment, mother had spoken more clearly, written more clearly, then perhaps everything would have been different. People often think wills are a distant concern, that only older people need them. Only those with substantial assets need to worry. But in truth, the important thing isn't the money or the house, but how one wishes to be remembered. A clear will isn't about dividing assets. It's about preserving peace, respect, and connection among those who remain. The biggest lesson from this story isn't found in any courtroom, but in a statement that everyone who witnessed it remembers this should have never gone to court. Each word like a heavy nod. Because it's true. If there had been a lawyer from the start, if the 2010 document had been clearly revoked when the 2014 one was made, if the 2014 document had been signed on every page, if someone had kept it in a more reliable place than a sofa. Sometimes, just a small action can prevent a widespread fire. But in life, there are no what-ifs. She never thought that cushion, where she used to sit watching TV, where she rested after shows, would hide not just a piece of paper, but an entire battle no one was ready for. And by the time the matter concluded, everything ended according to law. But what remained was far from neat. No one truly won. There was only a lesson that people were forced to learn by heart, even unwillingly if you don't want your loved ones to argue after you're gone. Then make everything clear while you still can. Even if it's difficult to discuss, even if it feels awkward, it's what needs to be done, not for yourself, but for those who remain. Keep one clear will, revoke the old one with evidence, have a lawyer review every line, store it in a proper place, not in a cushion, cabinet, or old drawer. It may sound cold, but it's the warmest way to love your family when you can no longer be there. No one blames Aretha. She was human, and her legacy remains legendary. But if anyone asks what made her incomplete, the answer lies not in her voice, not in the spotlight, but in a few pieces of paper. Paper without song, paper with only words, but words not enough to soothe hearts. When everything passed, people still sang respect in her memory. But the greatest respect, in the end, is respecting each other by not leaving behind ambiguities. Because once the person who left is gone, clarity is the only thing left to hold family ties. And Aretha, though she was the queen, could not return to explain. Rightfully, someone like Aretha Franklin, an icon, an unmistakable voice, a woman who made all of America pause when she sang, her legacy should have concluded with more serenity. But real life rarely ends like a movie. There are sustained silent notes that make the listener forget the brilliant melody that preceded them. And with Aretha, it was precisely that chaotic legal aftermath that made her ending not just sad, but incomplete. Everyone assumed that a celebrity, someone with a decades-long career, would have a team to handle everything impeccably. But no, beyond the spotlight, beyond hits like Respect or Natural Woman, was a woman, like countless others, who could still be perplexed, procrastinate, and act on impulse. 2 handwritten wills, inconsistent, lacking proper procedures. 1 hidden in a locked cabinet with each page notarized. 1 tucked into a sofa cushion with only a final signature. All this turned her posthumous affairs into a prolonged, unending saga. Her family, whom she always prioritized, was precisely where the most profound damage from this lack of preparation occurred. Each child had a desire. Each line of the will had an interpretation. Every word spoken, every memory, also became evidence, a point of contention. No more family dinners, no more tales of their mother as a legend. Only cold meetings, suspicious glances, and cracks that widened with each court appearance. Aretha's case quickly became a prime example in legal seminars, in campaigns raising awareness about the critical importance of creating a proper legal will, especially for stars, those with vast fortunes and complex ecosystems behind them. The lesson from Aretha was a stark awakening. How to organize, who to choose as executor, how to ensure old versions don't cause confusion, where to store it, who should know. Everything needed to be cleared down to the last detail. Sadly, sometimes someone has to fall for others to learn how to stand. And Aretha, albeit unconsciously, bore that fall. No one denies her irreplaceable influence in music history. No one can rewrite the legacy she etched into the memories of generations. But at the same time, no one can deny one thing: she could have left a more comfortable conclusion for those she left behind. Many people think wills are a matter for lawyers, but in reality, it's a matter of family affection. An unclear will can erase years of love with just a few uncertain lines. A small procedural oversight can turn trust between siblings, between mother and child, into prolonged suspicion. And a sofa cushion, an absurdly ordinary item, could become the center of a legal maelstrom lasting half a decade. That is what truly stings people, not because Aretha left little, but because what she left was not properly arranged, and when the most precious things are no longer clear. Heartbreak is inevitable because that lack of clarity ultimately broke a part of the most beautiful memories of her, not in the eyes of the public, but in the hearts of her own flesh and blood. On one side is a musical treasure that lives on forever. On the other is a tangled legal landscape steeped in hurt. Aretha, whether she intended to or not, left both. And what's even sadder is that the legal dispute is remembered almost as much as her voice, at least in recent years. In the end, who was right or wrong in the will dispute no longer mattered. The verdict was given, the inheritance was divided, but what was lost could not be returned by any compensation. Trust, memories, connection, all were fractured. Aretha once said, "Being the queen is not all about singing, and being a diva is not all about singing. It has much to do with your service to people." Perhaps, from that very statement, one understands another. Truth service is not just performing on stage. It is also preparing for your loved ones a future free from turmoil, from doubt, from dispute, a future guided by clarity. Aretha's voice will continue to resonate in old radios, in favorite playlists, in the memories of countless people. But if there is a lingering low note after all, it is the low note of a legacy overshadowed by contention. A subtle yet profound reminder: loving is not just about giving, but also about arranging things so that when you are gone, those who remain do not suffer further loss. And that is why, after all the glory, Aretha Franklin's final affairs became a concluding chapter with many echoes, a chapter that people cannot stop reading because it is mysterious and isn't good. Aretha Franklin left the world an immortal musical legacy, but her tangled legal aftermath became a bitter reminder. Even the greatest icons can have their heritage clouded by procedural ambiguities. Two wills, one in a locked cabinet, one in a sofa cushion, were not just documents, but evidence of the complexity, conflict, and pain experienced by her loved ones. Such ambiguity should not be repeated, regardless of who you are, great or small, wealthy or modest. Preparing for tomorrow is an act of love, not for yourself, but for those you leave behind. If this story resonates with you, do not hesitate to like, comment with your thoughts, and subscribe so you don't miss more emotional true stories from behind the spotlight. This is not just a remembrance of a music queen, but a deeply human lesson, one anyone can face if we do not speak up in time.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video until the end. If you found this content helpful, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any of our daily video updates. Now feel free to explore other exciting videos currently shown on your screen. Goodbye, and see you in the next video.